Canada. Maple syrup and like Captain say.
The leaders of more than 24 countries are in Egypt at a meeting that's being called the Summit for Peace and is being chaired by Egypt and the United States, two countries that have played key roles in mediating a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas. It's a deal that's paused the fighting in Gaza and it's seen the return of all living hostages to Israel. Barbara Leaf joins us now. She is the former U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Near Eastern Affairs, serving as a key advisor to the U.S. government in the aftermath of the October 7th attacks in Israel. Ambassador, welcome.
Thank you.
It is a historic day in the Middle East, and as someone who spent so much of your diplomatic career focused on that region, I do want to ask you first how you feel as you see some of these scenes coming out of Gaza, out of Israel, and now Egypt. What, if anything, stands out to you?
Well, look, I have felt almost as exhilarated as the people of Israel and the Palestinians of Gaza at the prospect of this war ending. It has been so long overdue this day. And so I know that from having been texting and speaking with people in the region over the last 10 days, there is both a huge lifting of spirits, obviously on either side of that boundary line, Gaza and Israel, but also a sense of relief mixed with some trepidation, frankly, on the part of a number of regional government senior leaders. Because this, in a sense, as hard, as tough as it was to get to this point in the negotiations, this all-for-all exchange of people and an end to the conflict, as hard as that was to get there, it's pretty much the easiest step on a very long road.
Yeah, that really is the important aspect of this, because underpinning all the celebration and ceremony that we're seeing today is this peace plan that Trump unveiled a few weeks ago with the Israeli Prime Minister at his side. What have you made of this plan, as a whole? Because for what it's worth, this is a 20-point peace plan, and just today we seem to have achieved maybe 2 or 3 of those.
That's right. And look, I think it's fair to expect that there is going to be a lot of creative and artful redefining of terms and negotiating of the outer limits of each of these points. So that's why it will be a very hard-fought, long road of negotiations. In a sense, each of these points are almost a negotiation in and of themselves. And certainly from my perspective, the most critical piece is to move rapidly on some kind of law and order force. Just the most basic policing force is required right now. You see already that Hamas, of course, is trying to fill the void and fill it in an armed sense as the IDF falls back. But more profoundly, for at least a year and a half, there has been the most violent kind of anarchy reigning in Gaza, and it's critical to bring that to an end.
Do you see a way forward on that main sticking point that you've mentioned? Because do you see that coming from within, the Palestinian Authority, perhaps, or will that be led by maybe some of these mediating countries or Israel?
Look, there are many, many details that simply we don't know, and I don't believe the parties know, nor what I call the Gang of Eight, the 8 countries that came together several weeks ago in New York to seal the deal, as it were, with President Trump, and that led progressively to the day today. So there is this question of international stabilization force, but I think you need something very rapid on the ground, again, in terms of basic policing. Logically, that would be drawn from the Palestinian security forces, who are in some measure ready to do that. And there are Palestinian policemen, Palestinian Authority policemen, still resident in Gaza who could be part of that force. But those are the many, many details yet to be spelled out.
We can't forget, of course, for the benefit of our viewers, that we did see a ceasefire earlier this year. That fell apart after about 42 days. What, if anything, gives you confidence that this time might be different?
Because from the outset, this has been framed as the end of the war. not a partial, step-by-step, phased approach to handing over some of the hostages for some Palestinian detainees or prisoners. This has been framed repeatedly, and you've even heard Prime Minister Netanyahu himself use those terms just ahead of President Trump's address to the Knesset, that this is the end of the war. And that is a spectacular development, but boy, now all the hard work starts.
Exactly. Now, speaking of the role that we saw Trump play, he received a hero's welcome in Israel. Even Israelis who've been critical of Netanyahu and the war in Gaza, they're there, chanting, "Thank you, Trump." Do you have a view about what this means for U.S. diplomacy in the region?
Well, look, on the one hand, there's no question that his personal investment in driving this to this stage got us there, got the parties there. And to my mind, that personal investment is going to be critical to move forward all along this long and difficult path. And that's a tall order for any American president who has, and the president himself said this during his address, that's a tall order for any American president to say personally invested in such a difficult negotiation over a protracted period of time. But it was decisive in this case. Now, Israel is going to go through its own period of domestic political churn. It's already starting. And I think it will be critical for the U.S. to remain engaged on this. And the regional states, the Arab states, and Turkey will expect that. And indeed, they will press for that constantly.
And many of these players are in Egypt, and this is very much the topic at hand. Are you watching for anything specific from that meeting?
Well, the meeting in itself is the event, is the point to bring a collection of leaders, starting with those 8, but then a number of other important leaders, including the Europeans, I might add, to invest this agreement with a larger political galaxy of support, if you will. I think what the Arab leaders will be looking for, most especially, is a clear indication that that elusive political horizon for Palestinians, a Palestinian state, will be sketched out in, if not in greater detail, with greater clarity, with greater firmness. They're looking for the president to speak to this in a way that he's spoken on annexation. It's great to say no annexation will occur, but what they're really going to be looking for is something clearer on the question of a Palestinian state, however long and winding the road is to get there.
That really was the final question I wanted to press you on, Ambassador. Most experts agree that rebuilding Gaza and providing the Palestinian people with economic opportunity will be that important step for longer-term safety, longer-term security in the region. Do you see that being spoken of enough by mediators, by world leaders?
Yes, in fact, that's been a key reference point throughout this discussion. And I've always felt, as costly as it will be and as protracted and complex as it will be just to get the unexploded ordnance out of there to remove the rubble, as physically difficult as all of that will be, in a sense, that too is the easy part. It's the political rebuilding and the security rebuilding that is going to be extraordinarily complex and testing of everyone's political will and endurance and commitment. The reconstruction will occur, and there are a number of governments who've signed up to do that, but they are signing up to do so within a political framework for the Palestinians.
All right, Ambassador, we leave it there. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
That is Barbara Leaf, former U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Near Eastern Affairs.